Dear Convo friends, a question that I get a lot is, Maaike, what are your favorite AI tools? What are the things that you use on a daily basis for both personal and work-related Gen AI use cases? So I thought, why not put together a small video kind of outlining what I use Gen AI for and which tools are my personal favorites. So to start with that first question, what do I use Gen AI for? Well, I must say, I love reading and writing, so I tend to do a lot of that still the analog way, reading books on paper, making notes by hand, by writing them out in little notebooks. I love my fountain pens. So I honestly love reading and studying, so that's something I tend to do myself quite a lot. However, I do use Gen AI for lots of other purposes. For personal use, just, the everyday small stuff, and I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. And to support my research and study activities and making sure I keep track of everything I read, that I can find it back, in these stacks of notebooks. Things like that, that's something that Gen AI comes in really handy. For work, of course, it's quite different. There, my work is mostly about designing Gen AI as part of a larger effort, and there I do a lot of LLM selection, system prompt design, testing and deploying, writing evaluations. That's something that's becoming increasingly more important in my own work. And of course, the evergreen for us content specialist is designing, testing, and evaluating our RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation architecture. So let's look at some tooling that I use for my personal everyday Gen AI life. The everyday small stuff. Oh, let me move myself out of the way. Funny enough, I find myself doing this all the time. Something is wrong with something that I don't use a lot. For instance, this is my electricity cupboard. I don't know if that's a word in English, but these are like the mains, switches and stuff. And whenever something goes wrong, like the other week we had a fire alarm that wouldn't switch off and it drove me completely crazy. I find myself just taking a picture, telling chat, hey, this is the problem. Can you please help me solve this? And that works really, really, really well. So taking a picture, troubleshoot my problem and help me solve it. Sometimes I have to tell chat like which side is up in a picture, but once it knows that, you'll be surprised at how well it can help you with everyday stuff. Household appliances that have really weird interfaces that you don't understand, a second-hand coffee maker that doesn't come with a manual. This is actually something that ChatGPT is really, really useful for. And yes, I do use ChatGPT because, hey, it's almost like the default, isn't it? If I need to do something that's a little bit more task specific, I like to resort to genspark.ai. Genspark also is an app, but it comes with a number of specialized agents like, a slide maker, a data sheet analyzer, a deep researcher, a designer. So they keep adding new like task specific agents to their suite, and that's really nice. Bear in mind though, this is a Chinese app. So even though the guardrails apparently seem to be there, I wouldn't put in anything that's even remotely personal. But for generic questions, generic research, GenSpark does significantly better, I find, than ChatGPT. Plus, it has a multimodal approach. So if you use the GenSpark super agent, that will actually combine the expertise of multiple LLMs into one query. So that's really interesting. If you want beautiful language, especially in non-English languages, Claude, Sonnet, and also the Claude app are my go-to. I find that Claude has a way richer vocabulary, if you will. It's way better in synonyms, and overall I find the content that's generated by Claude way, way better, way more rich and rich, I guess is the word, than ChatGPT. Also, Claude is not as prone to mood swings as ChatGPT. What I do find is that, OpenAI models, whenever there's a new update, takes about 3 weeks for them to get it right, whereas Claude just consistently delivers a really nice tone of voice and a really nice basic quality, if you want. For data, for instance, analyzing a crypto portfolio or anything that's very data heavy, Julius.ai is something to definitely check out. Julius is really just about data analysis, and it offers notebook features, and it's just really strong in interpreting data consistently. So even if you have like more complex spreadsheets with merged cells or manual input, Julius tends to be very good at consistently giving reliable results from that. So that's the everyday small stuff for me. Let's move on to, well, I wouldn't call it small stuff. It's definitely every day, but of course research and study takes up a large part of my life. First of all, because I love learning, but also because, yes, I do have to kind of stay up to date in a way that doesn't drive me completely insane. And what I do find, especially if I want to do academic research, reading the latest papers on Gen AI, linguistics, conversation design, consensus.app. Mind you, it's app, not consensus.ai. Consensus.app is actually, I'd call it mind-blowingly good. What it offers is a Gen AI interface, so a conversational interface that's completely focused on doing research in academic papers. So you can ask your research question and it will go and not only query open source academic papers, but it will rank and re-rank and, do lots of like little side quests. Like, okay, if I go beyond the most obvious papers, what else can I discover in terms of themes or research perspectives? And it does all that in a very transparent and easy to follow way. So you've got like your main research interface on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, it actually explains everything it's doing. You can access all the papers that it cites. So this for me is a great way to discover new perspectives in research. For instance, right now I'm reading up a lot on what users' self-confidence does with their confidence in the AI and the amount of critical thinking that they apply and how these two kind of interact. There's a new paper on that like almost every other week. So this is a great way just to keep track and to really, also bring my own mind into a state where I'm open for new perspectives while still being completely in the loop or actually at the steering wheel myself. What I also do, because of course, again, I love reading, so I do read all these papers, but in order to determine what I read, I use Mind Studio, and again, let me move myself over here, perhaps. No, over here. I use Mind Studio to create little research-oriented workflows that actually are integrated into my browser. So what you can see here, I've got a research paper open in my browser, and I can hit this little Mind Studio tab here, and that will open up a whole number of little helper workflows or agents if you want, where I can, for instance, do like a quick summary of that paper, and it will do that real time. And it not only summarizes research papers, but basically everything that's in your web browser at the moment, including YouTube transcripts, which of course is amazing. And if you're a little bit handy with prompting, I don't just tell it to summarize the paper. No, I tell it to summarize it from my perspective with my particular interest and needs. So that will give me a summary that's really tailored to my research needs as a linguist and a prompt designer and a conversation designer and what have you. What I can also do with Mind Studio is once I've got all these abstracts and little bits and pieces of information, I can save them to a file or send them to an email address for, to compile like weekly insights, like, okay, what did I read this week? What did I think of it? Because I can also take notes this way. And what's really interesting is that it's in the browser. So it's integrated in the place where I do my work anyway. Or as we would call that in minimalist design principles, it's anchored in the task domain. So I don't have to leave my paper to do this. The functionality actually is brought to me right at the place where I need it. And this for me is amazing because I've been trying to build research assistants from like day one when ChatGPT arrived. And mostly that involved building a separate user interface where I had to kind of import or upload the papers and then kind of, make all kinds of little tool calls. And it was really complicated. And at the end of the day, I never found myself revisiting that app because I was always on my phone in my browser reading these papers. So this for me is a real game changer. This is actually the only work-related Gen AI that I actually use. I know, I'm horrible. But the thing is, I'm just not structured enough, I guess, to automate anything else because that presupposes a very structured way of doing things, a very structured way of living. And to be honest, I miss chaos, right? Yeah. But that's perhaps for another video. Mind Studio, of course, is not just for doing or creating little research helpers. It's an agent workflow builder platform that has a very intuitive prompt design and workflow building environment. It's got a really easy learning curve compared to N8N and Make, and also some of the more like serious, like grown-up frameworks like Langflow or Llama Index or what have you. What's really nice about Mind Studio, I find, is that you have access to a whole list of LLMs. So it's not just OpenAI, it's not just Claude or Gemini. It comes with about 50 to 60 different LLMs that you can all use. Also mix and match them in your workflows. So if you've got a workflow step it should be really fast and cheap. And you still can even select GPT 3.5 Turbo, like, the original ChatGPT LLM, which is incredibly cheap and fast. And if you want to do something that needs a robust and reliable model, you can go for the more, recent, but also slightly more expensive research models. So that's something you can do in Mind Studio and something I really like. There's rudimentary evals, so workflow evaluations. How well is your workflow performing? There's a prompt playground. You've got your workflow builder. You can create. It's got a full-blown RAG implementation. You can do tool calling, function calling, basically everything. And there's lots of third-party integrations ready built already. So you can integrate with your LinkedIn, with your socials. You can post on YouTube. There's a lot of content functionality in Mind Studio. So it's got browser integration, but also a standalone front end. So if you want to kind of integrate that on your website, perfectly possible. And that for me makes it a great my first Gen AI agent platform, and also the platform that I've been using in my courses for the last 15 cohorts. Highly recommended for sure, especially because it comes with a free tier that you can try out for, I think, 14 days. That's basically my and Gen AI on a personal level. Again, very kind of haphazard use. I'm just not structured enough for workflowifying my life. That's completely different for my work, of course, because Gen AI is not something I just use, it's also something I build. And when I look at how I work for my clients, like that, that's quite a different picture, because when I work with my clients, I'm either on a proprietary platform, especially when I'm there to help teams build chatbots. Typically, those teams work on, the platforms that we know and love really well. Platforms like Cognigy, VoiceFlow. So these are like proprietary black box. There's not a lot I can influence in my prompts. There's a lot of stuff already pre-built because it just gives you the competitive advantage of not having to build everything from scratch. My other type of clients, which are mostly startups and smaller companies that are experimenting with Gen AI, they tend to have in-house Gen AI environments where they've built a safe experimentation platform, as it were, with some models available. It's usually quite code intensive, and that's where I'm typically part of either the development or the design team, product management team, and really help thinking out these apps. And as you can imagine, when I do my prompt work there, I'm not allowed to use any commercial apps for privacy and security reasons, obviously, because we don't want any proprietary company information to be sent to a large language model and accidentally becoming part of their training data. So even with all the safety features on, I never use ChatGPT, for instance, for my work, or Claude. Of course, I use the underlying LLMs, but always in an environment that's safe with the proper guardrails and security measures in place. So what I need there is what we call LLMOps, and I think I need to move my little mugshot yet again. Typically, when I design Gen AI, that kind of looks like this. We start, of course, with requirements. I start identifying, hey, which data do I need to make a workflow work, or which information do we want to use as source for our chatbot. So data collection and preparation, making sure that it ends up in a vector database for your RAG and everything, chunking and pre-processing and embedding. Model selection is, of course, an important part, not only which model has the best performance, but also in terms of latency and cost. Because if your application is really Gen AI heavy, that can become pretty expensive pretty soon. Of course, prompt and workflow design is an important step in designing Gen AI apps, as is the design of knowledge management. This is still a rather new or under-specified, if you will, part of Gen AI work. Mostly when people upload their documents and their content and something goes wrong, they tend to think, oh, let's fix the prompt, whereas the problem might actually be in your source content. So that's also an important part of what we call LLMOps. Evaluations, building proper evaluations and guardrails to ensure that what we build is transparent, observable, and traceable. And of course, deployment and monitoring. The actual deployment, that's of course not really my domain. That's typically more, our DevOps teams. But after your Gen AI app is live, of course, that's where the real work starts, because people start using it, and you want to make sure that your app is working well and keeps working well. So again, observability is an important part of my work. If I look at my tasks in this little LLMOps cycle, I think that my work focuses mainly on system prompt design. So specifying the global behavior of a bot or a Gen AI app and the underlying interaction model. And for that, I need a LLM playground where I can design and test these prompts. And also I need to be able to set certain parameters like temperature, context length, and a few others. Another part of my work is, of course, workflow design, because yes, you can have one big system prompt, but if they grow too long, they become completely unmanageable, and you also want some more control over, hey, where does my Gen AI app go? Which options does my user have? Where do I want to send someone left or right? Where do I want to invoke certain tools? So even though agentic AI is promoted as completely autonomous and self-regulating, we do find ourselves still designing workflows or funnels, even goal-oriented agentic AI. And for that, I need some way to kind of chain prompts together. If it's like a real workflow, I need to be able to call tools, functions. I need to be able to store information in variables and call them from within prompts. So that's the kind of environment I need for workflows. For eval design, so designing evaluations, for instance, to get a sense of how well is my chatbot answering questions based on the source documents that they've got available, or how well is my chatbot adhering to the brand voice and tone, that's stuff that I design evaluations for. So I write basically, again, prompts, but these are not execution prompts, but evaluation prompts. And obviously I need some kind of designer space for that and a place to run these evaluations, either on test bots or bots that are actually in production already. And finally, we have RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, design and testing. So how do I set up a RAG architecture? So I need a vector database. I need some kind of ingestion pipeline where I can make sure that the data is ingested in the right way and is chunked in the right chunks, is embedded in the right embeddings, stuff like that. And for that, I of course need a vector database, a pre-processing pipeline, and some embedding models that I can use to embed all these little chunks into vector embeddings that an LLM can read and process. After we deploy, often I'm also asked to kind of keep an eye out on how well is our bot doing, and for that we need analytics, observability, and insights dashboarding, basically. So that's quite a lot, right? And for those of you who do conversation design, it might sound quite familiar because it's actually not that much different from our olden days conversation design, except here we're not designing conversational flows, but mostly workflows. So if we look at the tooling that I use for that, it basically falls apart in 3 different areas. First of all, my frameworks. And these are basically the fundamentals that allow you to build AI agents. There's 3 of them that I'd recommend getting familiar with, namely LangChain. And that's a framework for designing basic AI agents, and it offers you like a framework with prompts and tools and memories that actually comes with ready-made building blocks or components. If you want to build slightly more complex agents that also take into account states and memories and more complex logic and conditionals, then LangGraph might be an interesting one to check out. That's actually a framework that's built on top of LangChain, and it adds an extra layer of robustness of, things like having persistent memory, so not losing everything once your session is over, but being able to store certain parts of your conversation persistently over turns, allowing your bot to do multi-turn conversations, not just one run of your workflow. Decision paths and stuff like that. So if you need explicit decision making, which is still the case in many conversational agents, then a graph-based workflow might be interesting for you. And then we have Llama Index, which is a framework especially for connecting your agents to knowledge and context. So that's where you can kind of import your vector databases, create them, and making sure that your pre-processing and chunking and embedding is all in place. Do I use these on a daily basis? No. Do I know how to build with this extensively? No, because that's more of a developer job. Can I build basic agents, and do I know what to use when? Yes, absolutely. So just reading up on this a little bit, perhaps watching some YouTubes, installing the frameworks and just see what it looks like, that can already be really helpful. But just knowing that these are 3 important frameworks that are used a lot in the industry, that's also a good starting point. Of course, this is mostly code-based. So that's another thing. If you're not into coding, you might want to have a visual flow builder to use these frameworks. And for that, there's actually quite a bunch around. The ones that I really like are Flowise, Langflow, and Langsmith Studio, actually. And what you can see here, compared to Mind Studio, which also offers visual building, this is a little bit more, this is like one layer deeper into the actual technical infrastructure of workflow building, which gives you a lot more control because it's actually you that's deciding which components you want to put together. And this is a very basic chatbot where you basically have your user input, you have a prompt, you select a model, and that will give you an output. That's basically your chatbot. But this is where you can insert logic, tooling, basically everything from the frameworks I just mentioned. You can build that in here. This is actually Langflow. Flowise and Langsmith are comparable. And then finally, to kind of build and test more robust implementations, that's where we come that's where we arrive at the full-blown LLMOps platforms. And LLMOps platforms basically offer an all-in solution for designing, building, testing, and deploying Gen AI applications. As with the frameworks, the LLMOps platforms have a pretty steep learning curve if you compare it to, for instance, I don't know, ChatGPT or Mind Studio. Also, they typically don't come with a front end because they're really meant almost as a middle layer between end user and development team. So your LLMOps platform is where you take care of things like testing and observability, of comparing different prompt outputs, of designing your prompts in a more robust way. And here's some examples. Like here is this is the prompt playground from Orc. Orc is one of my favorite platforms for LLMOps, also the platform that we use in my course. And as you can see, there's just a whole lot going on here that I'm actually not even showing all of it, but this is where you can really tweak each and every aspect of your large language model and your system prompt. And then here's a little example of what an evaluation looks like. So this is where you design your evaluations. Again, Orc comes with a full RAG implementation, so you can add your knowledge sources and evaluate those as well. So that's a really nice and very complete LLMOps platform with a focus, I find, also on team collaboration. So that's something that I find is really important if you're part of a larger team. It really helps if I can design a prompt and deploy it and then let my developer know, hey, listen, here's the API call to that prompt. Can you please pull that into your code base so you don't have to have the full prompt there? You can just call that prompt through an API, which I think is really cool. Other platforms that I frequently use are Langsmith, which is comparable to Orc. Langfuse, which is the open source equivalent of Langsmith. And the advantage of Langfuse is that you can run it as a local instance. So when you're really big on privacy and open source, Langfuse might be a viable alternative. And again, Orc for when you want really strong team collaboration features. I think this is about it. I think I've got one final question left. Do I need to test every new model and framework out there? My answer, no, absolutely not. Why not? Well, new models might actually influence the outcome of your prompts in a way that you can't predict. So you might unknowingly introduce regression. Also, what I find is that model improvements nowadays are not as big as dramatic as they used to be when ChatGPT was just around the corner like 2 years ago, right? So the difference between the original ChatGPT LLM, which was GPT 3.5 Turbo, and GPT-4 was day and night. We really were like, what is happening here? I must say that GPT 4.0 to GPT-5, yes, there was some improvement in robustness and data handling, but for most of my prompts, which are mostly about content, I didn't see that much of a difference. Or even worse, I saw some of my prompts actually regressing, giving suboptimal results compared to GPT-4, for instance. And another thing is, I want to stay sane. I don't want to spend my life in FOMO and imposter syndrome because I don't know the ups and downs and the pros and cons of the latest models and the latest apps. I mean, I've got a life, right? And instead, what I'd suggest is go for understanding first order principles. So understand what an LLM is and how it works, and that it's a prompt completion engine, that it doesn't contain any facts or knowledge. Develop a sense of, or actually this one first, invest in a good default test set. So I've got a little, what I call my golden test set of prompts that I know what I expect from them in terms of responses, right? So if I want to test a new model, I just upload my golden test set in one of these LLMOps platforms. I select the models that I want to run this prompt against, and I can just compare the output and the responses. And if I see big changes, either positive or negative, at least I know. And based on that little regression test with my golden standard, I can recommend my clients like, hey, it might be interesting for you to upgrade to this model because it's better, cheaper, faster, what have you. On the other side, I also sometimes advise my clients to go back one version because it's cheaper, faster, or better. And what's really interesting is that some of the prompts that I designed for the original GPT 3.5 Turbo still run the best on that model. So even compared to more modern models, the best outcome is still on that old little grandpa model, if you will. Develop your own niche and expertise. As you can see and probably hear, I talk mostly about content prompting and a little bit of data analytics. I don't code, so I don't invest in finding out which models are best in coding. Because for my coding questions, which are very basic reading and understanding questions, even GPT 3.5 Turbo is good enough. So do I know everything about MCP? No. Do I know everything about vibe coding? Well, except for the fact that Lovable just keeps turning all my interfaces fluorescent yellow. No, I don't know anything about them. I don't want to. I know what my niche is, I know what my clients want me to know, and that's what I invest in. What else did I want to say? Can't remember. Well, I guess that's basically it for now. So I hope you find this helpful, and if you have any more questions, just let me know. I'm more than happy to record a few more of these videos to kind of talk you through my Gen AI life. Have a good one and groetjes. Talk soon.